Hello folks, BoatBrew.com here once more with another very rare commander deck tech video. So in the previous tape I've explained to you a deck for Teneb which was more towards Duel, not Duel, multiplayer commander. This one is probably gonna be much better in Duel Commander and French Commander, but I don't think it's bad in multiplayer Commander as well. It's definitely worse than the one I've shown you in another video, which is more about just value and grinding and card advantage and so on. And this one is more about a bunch of creatures to do cool stuff. This is about a combo deck that can actually combo off multiple ways. It has a lot of ways to dig for the combo, protect it, or get stuff back, or get creatures like which are removal sticks, etc. But it's very bad at actually catching up and controlling anything. It's just doing its own thing. It's hoping not to be killed very quickly. You can chump block with some of your creatures, etc. and so on. But you're not a very interactive deck, that's for sure. So in a table where you're playing a lot of black decks and a lot of blue decks and a lot of controlish white decks, this is not gonna be that great, because this is mainly designed for Duel Commander, even though there is still a million cards that you can tune and change here for your taste, for your playstyle, to make the deck more competitive, for example, more smooth, etc. This is what I just put together, but I see there are a lot of cards that I can make this maybe board, which partially you can see on the screen now. You can make that list just never ends, basically, because there's so many things you can put into this deck, starting from the Hulk combo. Hulk is now, I think, banned, so you can't do that in either multi or duel. You guys probably know it, right? I just know that it's banned. I'm just not like 100% sure that whether it's dual or multi. Then I know that Necrotic, which this deck is basically based upon, is on the orange list in Duel Commander. And I know that because of more or less recent change in rules, you can't combo off with Ooze plus Triskelion and that old Phyrexian card in your graveyard. You can't do that combo. So previously you could do that. It was actually a deck even in Legacy at some point, but you can't do that anymore. That combo doesn't work now. So there was something involved with layers, I think, in there. So just what goes on top of what, so on. But you can still do a lot of things with Necrotic and just other creature combo chains. So we still have Teneb as our general, but this deck might actually be better suited with something like Doran or Anafenza, possibly. Probably Anafenza would be better, just a good beat stick to start things up. So you don't really need Teneb, and if you have the pull to splash for red or for blue, then you can add more combos to the deck and add more cool cards to it. So if you, let's say if you have a 4-color commander or 5-color commander, to allow playing red cards, you can then play red cap, and that opens up not only the kitchen things part of the Milara and Offenza chain, but also the red cap chain, so you can kill your opponents with infinite damage right away. Well, all of your opponents, if you're playing multiplayer. And then you can play the Teyza chain of old 3-mana Teyza plus Soul Warden plus Rakdos Champion and Safi Eric's Daughter, so you can play that combo with so gain infinite life, etc. And then nuke all their guys, and then if you keep on, if you have, what was it? If you have Rakdos in the deck, the actual god, then you can deal infinite damage to them. And then if you have a 5-color commander, you can play Redcap or Morg Fanatic and the Revelaric combo, so you can have Body Double and Mirror Entity in your deck. So there are a lot of things you could do, and Teneb is just a filler commander here, so it's not really the general that you have to play. Okay, let's go to the spoiler view. Let's see some pictures. This is not ordered in mana cost order. We can actually try to do that because that might be a better way to represent the cards. So the list then is gonna be kinda a lot, so I would have to go back and forth. Yeah, I just didn't realize how many one-offs are in this list and how it's all so diverse. Okay, let's go back to type. I'll just scroll down to lands and once again point out that you can improve your mana base a lot. I'm having a lot of budget cards in here, but basically just throw in most of your duels and fetches that you got in there. I have a very low land count in here, 32, which is pretty low for any singleton type of deck, I think, but I do have a bunch of mana dorks in the deck, and also my curve is pretty low in this deck, so I think it's okay to do that. And I can always mulligan, so that's a thing. And this deck mulligans pretty well because it's so low curve, and if your opponent just doesn't draw removal, then you just win. Something like that. For some reason I marked Primordial Sage here twice, but it's definitely a card that you want in the deck. Of course, I suppose I forgot some other piece in here if I have like suddenly 2 copies here. So basically this deck would play pretty much all of the green cheap 1 or 2 mana, one or 2 casting cost mana dorks. That's the idea. Of course you can't play Noble Hierarch if your general doesn't have blue in its costs, etc., because Noble has that blue mana symbol on it. But you can play all of the other mana dorks, and you should. I suppose let's start with the combos that this deck can do. I'll go for spells later, though they're still a very big part of the deck. Basically, what you can do is you can do your modern chain. So taking a sacrifice outlet like Cartel Aristocrat, for example, or some other. There are 2 more in the deck, like the Varrols and the Viserys here. And then you couple it up with Anafenza or Milara, and then you get your usual kitchen things stuff going on. You also have Archangel of Foon plus where are you? Spike Feeder. That's another infinite combo for infinite life and make your guys infinite. Also, if you happen to have Teleport Cutthroat in play, when you have the Malaria package in play, or also Blood Artist, then you can actually kill all of your opponents and not just gain infinite life. And then of course you have the Necrotic combo package, which would include cards like Devoted Druid for plus Quill Spike here for making Ooze infinite and making infinite green mana. And then with Green Puppets, basically you clean their board with Ooze in play and Devoted Druid in graveyard. You just keep on putting and removing counters. And with a lot of green mana, a lot of creatures in the bean, thanks to such a cool tutor creature like Fauna Shaman. You can cycle your creatures in your hand and get whatever you want. Then, with a lot of green mana produced by the Quill Spike Devoted Druid chain, Necrotic can start shooting creatures at the opponent's face out of the graveyard. And it's also just a fine creature on its own. It's not spectacular, but it's fine. With Selvalu, you can draw your whole deck if you don't have Fauna Shaman, but you do manage to put in your graveyard Quill Spike and Devoted Druid. Are there other combo pieces? Well, you can actually kind of show off a little bit by killing your opponents in a fancy way with when you start the Necrotic Ooze combo. If they're all at high life, especially so if you're playing multiplayer or your opponent has a bunch of like ground blockers or some like also like gigantic blocker. So it could happen like giant blocker with hexproof, let's say, and that can also like grow infinites. I don't know, that's an unlikely scenario, but that could happen. And they're at very high life total, so multi-tier Mastercore is not gonna help. Then you can kill them in a fancy way by just drawing a bunch of cards with the Selvalu or some other spell like Skeletal Scrying. I believe it's still in the deck. Then you can get at your hand Skeletal Vampire, play the Vampire, play the Blood Artist or Teleport Cutthroat, being also Birds of Paradise to graveyard so that your Necroticus produces infinite black, and then you just start sacrificing the bad tokens and they lose life accordingly, and you just keep on doing this until they die. So it's like a fancy way to finish everybody off at the table in case you're playing multiplayer Commander with this deck. But this cute package is probably not needed if you're only playing Duel variant of Commander with this deck. The Skeleton Vampire is also a fine creature in its own. It's just free flying bodies, so if you need like those type of blockers, it's cool. This deck is not really gonna win free combat all that often, so that's okay. Also, Suture Priest can gain you some life. It's also nice, let's say, if you don't have some combo pieces, and especially if, of course, it's especially good in multiplayer. But again, in Duel Commander, you're probably not gonna play it. I don't think it's gonna be needed, though it stops some of the funny infinite combo from their part. Like they can't really twin you out unless it's Pastormite plus Splinter Twin, because then I believe they can do it. No, they're just gonna die themselves. Actually, they're just gonna die because like they make a bunch of those tokens and they just die when they come in. So it stops twin combo, basically. Stops Restoration Angel plus Kiki-Jiki. So that's nice. And you need that buffer of life, that's for sure, especially multiplayer, but in Duel as well. But if your meta game locally with Duel Commander is not full of combo decks, then you probably don't need this. Turning is here just because of Necroticus, because sometimes you may not have enough creatures to cycle with Fauna Shaman, so you would have very few opportunities to actually establish a combo, and that gives Necroticus indestructibility, haste, trample. So sometimes if you have enough mana and enough of resources to cycle and dig, you can actually kill in one turn with Necroticus, so by binning Turnling somehow and giving Necroticus haste, and then you combo off, etc. Sage is really crucial, so let's talk about, but it's Mana Dork. So now let's switch on to the value creatures. Pretty much everything that's not essential to combo is just a value tutor creature. Like Primordial Sage just lets you draw more cards, so you want effects like this, you probably want more of those. Don't exactly remember whether Glimpse of Nature is legal. I think it's not. It would be ridiculous if it's still legal, but yeah, part of from pro draw like this, you definitely want more tutors. So here I don't actually have as much, but you definitely want demonic tutors and Eladamri skulls and things like that, and Survival of the Fittest, Birthing Pods, all of such cards, Sylvan Library. Then cards like Banisher Priest, Fiend Hunter, and Big Game, and Royal Assassin are just ways to keep creatures in check. So because you actually don't run that many actual non-creature spells to kill their creatures, you need all of these, including Flashback Marauder. And then Escort allows you to not scoop sometimes to just a mass removal spell, because you can sometimes find it and play it, put it into play at instant speed, like via Corridor Calling, for example. With some tuning, this deck actually may run Collected Company, and then Escort becomes way better because sometimes you can flip into it. But to be able to run Collected Company in this deck, I would need a lot of restructuring for this deck. Yeah. Right. Hornet Nest is just a way to clog the ground. Lawless Troll is a very cool creature. I actually like it a lot since 2011 when it first came out, I think, from the new Ravnica or Return to Ravnica set, because since that time I became fascinated with Necroticus, and I didn't play first Milira based Birthing Pod deck. It was a Necroticus based pod deck, and to make that deck functional I needed some copies of Flawless Troll, at least one, to discard some creatures from my hand to make Necroticus go. And it's still a very nice staple in a lot of modern dredge decks and stuff like this. And sometimes when you just want a resilient body to just buy some time, you sometimes fetch for it, and then it allows you to just trade sometimes with some of their attackers, just exhaust their resources and prolong the fight, etc. You have to have creatures like Kozali Pride Mage. You probably even need a Reclamation Sage in this deck as well. You definitely need to search for those cards. Scourge Nose is also one of the must-have utility creatures in such a deck. Wayfinder just helps you find more lands so that you can actually cast more than one spell per turn. It fills your graveyards. That's what you want to do. Saphiric's Daughter is nice here because with it in play, if you play a combo piece, you're somewhat safe. Though there could be, of course, spells like Path to Exile, Source of Closure, so it's not guaranteed, but it's nice to have it. And you can tutor as its instant speed as well, etc. Lark is just a great card in this deck. It returns a bunch of different things, especially if you put a Burial Pot in here or Sylvan Library. It's Survival of the Fittest, all those tutors, it becomes ridiculous. Having Soul Innistrad actually makes you more aggressive with your combo plays. So some players might think like, yeah, I want to combo off and play out my stuff only when I see that most my opponent is tapped out, or most of my opponents are tapped out, like in multiplayer. But having this creature in your deck actually makes you safe and feel more comfortable going for it as soon as you can, because in addition to Eternal Witness and Lark, you have the Soul of Innistrad, so you can return back stuff, and you have a lot of ways to actually mill yourself, so it's not uncommon to get this creature fast and have this kind of insurance. Of course, he and a bunch of parts of your deck are susceptible to Graveyard Hate, but you still have Archangel plus Feeder Duel to play around all the Graveyard Hate, for example. Right, so Valros was just another sacrifice outlet with some upside, with some extra abilities compared to Viserys here. Well, first is just blocker, mana dark. Mana base can be, of course, tweaked and improved drastically. I just put in here what I had. Of course, I don't own those. Well, not of course, but yeah, I don't know those cute expedition lands. Actually, you think that you should be careful with the cycle lands here. They come into play tapped. That's not what you want, and because of different mana lands and such, you would have lands come into play tapped. But basically, yeah, you want all the duels you can have. You definitely want Township in here as your backup plan. You want a bunch of mana lands. Backwoods is actually pretty good in this deck. Phyrexian Tower would be actually pretty good in this deck. Okay, now we're moving on to spells. Let's start from our singleton planeswalkers and artifacts. I tried different planeswalkers in this deck and I didn't like that. Liliana Heretical here is kinda cute, but it doesn't return legendaries, which is a big bummer. If it would, then I would definitely play it on this deck, but as it stands, it's just probably not worth it. But Vess, yeah, of course, tutors, sometimes couple of times, and that's enough. Altar of Dementia, it's a very interesting artifact. It acts actually as a combo piece sometimes, because it's a sacrifice outlet that they can't kill. It does the same thing as the Viserys and so on. And even if you don't have the combo, if you do it enough times, especially in Duel Commander, you can just win this way. If you never get to the combo but have this in play and some creatures and have a proper amount of gas, then yeah, you can mill him with that. Scrying is of course a staple here. Cord is a no-brainer. You need this tutor, and it's awesome that it's instant speed. Salvage is a kind of instant tutor because you have so much value and so many different combos that you're bound to hit something good, especially if you run more value non-basic lands. Rally is just sick here because your curve is so low, and a lot of your stuff is 3 or less mana, and then sometimes Rally could just win you the game when you mill like one combo and then they just kill the board and you draw this and you feel great because now it's the whole combo again and it's instant. So that's just insane. Wild Pair is just a cute card here, probably not necessary, probably could be something else, but especially in multiplayer it's just insane because it provides so much value. Like you can just tutor up like almost anything. You have such a variety of different creatures for all sorts of cases. Well, yeah, you can put in here a Shriekmore just to make this card even better and make some of your tutors better. Palace Sage is here because it's raise that effect every single turn, and your deck is full of creatures, and you do want them back to your hand occasionally, so it's great. The second ability is also fine, but you would just use it most of the time just in the multiplayer. Malevolent Awakening is okayish, but probably not the best card. I could definitely see something else in here over it. But your stuff dies all the time or gets exiled and etc. Yeah, and most of your creatures actually do something. They're not just like beefy creatures. But this other card, Holistic Wisdom, is something I'm really impressed because with Cycle Lands and Horizon Canopy, you get a feeling that you're playing with Life from the Loam in your deck, and with a deck full of creatures, so it's one card type, this Holistic Wisdom becomes insane. You're just rebuying stuff all over again, and if they don't have, let's say something like, well, Black Leyline, for example, then this just so much value. I'm really impressed with this card and this deck because in terms of card types, you're very linear. You have very few non-creature, non-land spells, and especially if you run some good value lands, it's just insane. Let's say you draw a basic land and then you get a man land from your graveyard back to your hand, and if you do happen to run like Cursor of Krufix or those types of cards, or maybe like even the Big Frog from the new set, then it becomes even more absurd. And especially if you have room for cards like Wasteland, Tectonic Cage, Goose Quarter, etc., which you would also improve in your deck by running something like Knight of Reliquary, which is also a great card to include on this deck. Glare is okay, and I don't know about the value controlish version of Teneb, which I talked about in the previous video, where something like Worship maybe would be better, but in here I could see both, and Glare is definitely much better in this creature heavy deck than in that value controlish version. That's just great. It's said it's not like opposition, it doesn't tap lands. Tapping artifacts is not insane. It's pretty cool in multiplayer, but in Duel Commander I don't think it's that big of an issue. But yeah, you want to stay alive. This deck is not very interactive. I've got a lot of spot removals here and put in some kind of removals on a stick, and put in more dig spells and more recursion spells. So yeah, you want cards like this will be very valuable for your gameplay, for your game strategy. Leap is just something that could be easily replaced by a survival, but I think both cards belong to this type of deck. Both are nice. Of course, survival will is just absurd, but Leap does a similar thing, yet very different. It basically prevents you from a bunch of removals, and it prevents your creatures from going to exile, so that you can just rebuy them from your graveyard later on. Ascendancy is actually interesting here. On one hand, it provides you a lot of capability to have a bunch of champ blockers, so the second ability makes it so that you would always have something to block with. But the first ability is very interesting because it makes an aggro plan a strategy, which is not normally gonna be the case, especially in multiplayer. In Duel things are different, of course, but this card is a flexible slot, so you don't have to run it. It's not integral to the deck, much like some of the dig spells like 60 Wilds. It's just 2 mana spell that can get me a creature or land, which is most of the time what it will get me, so it would rarely whiff. At the same time, it's sorcery, and it's not a tutor, and what I don't pick goes to the bottom, so it's basically a filler. They're much better cards, but you know which were. Weird Harvest is probably something you can't replace in this deck. It's just insane. Of course it's risky, but if you're gonna go off in the same turn, then you're probably safe. So I would recommend playing it when you can go off the same turn, or have a plan in case they just tutor up something like a Shriekmaw to kill your combo piece, or get something like a well, what can it be? Well, also something like a Fiend Hunter, whatever. It's nice that neither Necrotic or Shriekmaw, so those creatures can't kill your Necroticus because it's black, and you're normally gonna have ooze in play when you're casting harvest, or you're harvesting for ooze, and then you don't need creatures really in play when your ooze is there, so you want creatures in your graveyard. So you can't really replace this card, and I think you should run it. But if you have multiple ways to win and you're not so focused on the Necroticus, then you can cut it. Probably Dread Return is integral to the deck. You're milling yourself a lot, and you need to sometimes return back like Necroticus from your graveyard into play, and then you can combo off. Ill-Gotten Gaze is nice, but also not integral. It's just a way to rebuy some cards that died in the process. Then you have some obvious dig spells in addition to salvage and sick wells, like Mulch. So milling yourself, getting the lands for the early turns, and binning some creatures to the graveyard. You could also play Gather the Pack, I think, from the what was it, Origins, for the same purpose. As also this next card, Commune with the Gods. They all do similar job. You just pick the ones that you like the most, which are just simply better. You can definitely play Entomb in this deck. And I think you probably should play both, like Entomb and Buried Alive in this deck. If you're gonna play Entomb here, then you're probably gonna want to have some dread spells like Life from the Loam. Then you would probably want, if it's still legal, the Dark Depths Thespian Stage package, so that you can say with Entomb been one of those, but you can't of course been tutor into graveyard lands from Buried Alive. Real all-star in this deck is the Creeping Renaissance, because your deck is so full of creatures, so this one's gonna return a bunch of cards, and if you accidentally bin this card, so you mill it, it still has flashback. It costs 7, but by the time when you would actually want something like this, you're probably gonna have that much mana, and then you rebuy all those creatures. It's a very essential card if you really need to win, for example, through with Necrotic Ooze, and they have a big blocker, let's say, and let's say they have huge amounts of life, or you don't have enough resources to get to the turning, or you think that to get to those creatures to get through, you need just more random creatures to cycle via survival or fauna shaman. So you cast this, you get a bunch of creatures to your hand, and then you start cycling, and you get to the combo so that you can win for blockers, etc. Shattered Orders is fine, but there could be better cards. I just like that it searches up any creature and puts one into your graveyard. But if your deck's gonna be full of cards like Demonic Tutor and Sylvan Library and stuff like this and Survival, then you don't need this. This is just a temporary replacement. Yeah, that's mostly it. There are a bunch of cards you can play in here. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe, check out other videos I've recorded with Commander and some other formats. So I'll see you guys next time with some Magic, with some Feria, maybe with some Hearthstone. Check out our streams at twitch.tv/boatbrew. Right now it's mostly Feria there, but I do sometimes play Magic Online there or Hearthstone, so that's a thing. And don't forget boatbrew.com for articles and a bunch of other non-gaming content. So see you guys in the next tape. Bye.